All right, everyone. I'm so glad that you're back for another episode of More Than You Can Chew. I hope you didn't fill up on any appetizer podcasts because today's episode is certainly a full plate. That's because we're going to dive into another important aspect of thriving in this new era of not only Google's AI, but the growing adoption of a whole suite of LLMs like ChatGPT. And that aspect is digital PR. And there is not one other person than today's guest who can help us understand the role that digital PR has, and that is Alexandra Takalova. Alexandra, welcome to More Than You Can Chew.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for such a kind and warm introduction. It's just a pleasure being here today, and also talking about, well, my favorite topic, right? Because
Absolutely.
it's something that I do on a daily basis, right? So something that is just always on my list.
Absolutely. So let's kind of let's dive into it, right? So there's a lot of flux, a lot of uncertainty about AI and LLMs. There's a lot of insights about how they work, assumptions about how to influence them, tests that are attempting to confirm those assumptions. There's a lot of new acronyms flying around to try to rename or rebrand different strategies or, well, sell snake oil, which is not uncommon in our industry. But this one aspect I'm really interested in, and which you clearly have faith in since you founded a company that does digital PR. So that begs the question, and I'm asking this to play devil's advocate, not that I at all doubt its value. So, Alexandra, you're the best person to answer this. Why is digital PR vital in today's climate of uncertainty, and what proof do you have that confirms this?
Well, I think, first of all, I think digital PR is very important just because it allows you to put your brand on the best websites on the web, right? Because that is the most visited websites. I mean, in the best case scenario for sure, right? And everyone has been trying to do it in different forms, right? In different ways, like, from the very beginning of the internet, right? Because it's just obvious, right, that putting your brand on USA Today, on the Washington Post, on the Independent, on the Telegraph, and you can name any others, right? It's just kind of getting you the best out of your most probably digital PR and maybe even a combination of digital PR and marketing activities. Then I think if you think about LLM models, AI, about a little bit think about the future, right? Not the current state of things, because we all know that, like if you use ChatGPT, Gemini, and any other AI agent, right? You know that what they do right now, they kind of update the version of right now I think we have the new version of ChatGPT. And what does it mean? They've kind of recrawled, right, all the data. And in that way, they updated, right, the vision of ChatGPT by introducing the fifth one to their audience. And it's not really happening. It's not really up to date, right? So it's just happening when they kind of start their script, and then they give the end result to users. And I think the future is just getting this data, just having it in the real time, right, scenario, when the user goes somewhere like in ChatGPT and asking ChatGPT, what's going on in the world, right? And you get the answer straight away without the sources if you need, and so on. The same about, I think, Google AI overviews, right? That is, I think, the future. And what we kind of see is just, let's say, some elements, right? Some kind of fragments of at least what I think, like the possible reality that we can take advantage of. Because, I mean, if you go back to, right, AI reviews, for instance, in Google, then as a user, I find them very, very useful, right? They kind of answer some very generic questions very well. At what temperature I need to cook a cake, right? And I put a particular cake and I get the answer, right? Then I don't really need to go to long-form content written by a sales specialist, right? Where I kind of, try to find the answer to my question in the, 10th paragraph, maybe, if I'm lucky enough or not, and so on. So it kind of serves some of users' problems very well, and the same about the news, right? Because if you think over that, the real-time element right now is missing out. And then the next question that comes to my mind, if we continue this logic, then obviously the media outlets, they should get a certain priority, right? Like Reddit we have right now because it has a lot of first-hand user information, right? And also a bit kind of like it's also connecting the LLM models, right? Or you can call, them AI with the reality. And the newspaper, they're also kind of bridging, right? Kind of making this connection, right? Making a bridge between the web and the reality. The other question that we have, that obviously newspaper, they don't really want to help LLM models take and grabbing their data for free of charge for nothing. And they kind of most probably, like with Reddit, they have some conversations. They need to come to a certain agreement. But if you circle back to the main question, right, then being on newspapers and knowing how to get there seems to be one of the biggest priority, because if you want to be considered for the new, right, AI reality where users asking questions and getting the answer straight away in the real time, well, then, it's essential. I think that is more like a concept, right? Most probably you have more specific questions, because I'm sorry for putting this so big. But I think it's really like, whenever you have a high level understanding without saying like, you need to put this anchor text under this link, or, this link should be no follow or do follow, or why the brand mentions are also, play a role, or whatever it is, right? It's really like looking at the bigger picture is very important.
Absolutely. No, I love all that. And, for you, in the work that you're doing, since you're doing, this is the work that you do, right? So, like, how do you see, like, what is the role that digital PR plays in these systems? How do you feel that you're seeing it truly influence the outputs that ChatGPT has around questions around not just even brands, but even on products or services that the brand offers? How does digital PR fit in this whole ecosystem of visibility?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I've been recently, actually, it's kind of right now, what you see in AI agents and in Google AI overviews is kind of summing up what you've done so far and how well you've been marketing your product. Not only on the digital PR side, but on a bigger level, right? Because, for instance, we have a client, just a random example. They are from the travel niche. They are a very good brand, well-known brand, and they do, gosh, I would die if I try to do this, just being honest, because whenever I think about climbing Kilimanjaro, this makes me sick straight away. Because, I live in a very flat country. Like, the last time someone told me that they climbed something in the Netherlands, I was like, sorry? I was like, there was a hill. I was like, sorry. Well, not really a hill. I was like, oh, okay, fine. Because Netherlands is just flat, really, like, the hills, they kind of exist somewhere close to Germany, but they kind of exist, I would say. So yeah, I mean, like climbing something is not really what I'm looking forward or excited about, but that's what they do, right? So they do two things. They are based in Tanzania. They kind of help people climb Kilimanjaro, and they do safari. Safari seems to be better. Sounds better to me. And what we notice, right, even though they do kind of, right, on a brand level, on a kind of on a higher level, they market both services, right, equally well. On a TripAdvisor, they have equally good coverage in terms of, reviews on everywhere, literally. But when we kind of looked at the presence of AI reviews that are kind of mentioning their brand and their services, we noted that climbing Kilimanjaro is really killing, while Tanzania, safari, products is just a little bit off, right? What can be done here, right? In kind of, right, in these circumstances, that you can do more of digital PR activities, right? Well, first of all, you need to set up it as a goal on a company level, right? To talk more about Tanzania, to produce more content and so on. But also, right, on a digital PR side, that's where we can help too, right? Trying to basically create some campaign that will be tighten up with Safari, right? Or something like that. So, LLM models, they are quite good when it comes to eliminating some problems, some gaps that you've done unintentionally while you were marketing your product. And, well, for sure, digital PR can help a lot because obviously, right, whenever you get, it doesn't matter, a link, a brand mention, right, on a very good newspaper, then you get like +1 score, right? So you get, not a score, but you kind of improving your overall situation, right? And then eventually, you can get there. So that's what I see. For sure, there are way more things that we can talk about, right? But that is more like was a practical example that I think, listeners might find quite useful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think for listeners, kind of to your point of hearing a practical example, is it's important because I think a lot of people are confused on, or maybe don't really know, what is sort of digital PR worthy. Do you have other, even if it's not a precise example, but other insights around what can count as digital PR? What are things that people can leverage what they're doing as digital PR?
Yeah, I think obviously it gives more priority to your brand when it comes to LLM models, right? Because LLM models, they crawl media outlets, right? And if you appear there regularly, it doesn't matter whether we are talking about dedicated stories, right? Where you kind of create the story and then distribute it, or you just come as an expert, right? Because we do also a lot of expert quoting, right? Whenever, well, for sure, like, for our, like, Tanzania client, for instance, right? So they kind of, right, whenever we see an opportunity of pitching them as an expert to a relevant topic and journalist is looking for expert quotes, we always go after this. And what we notice, and I'm always try to be a bit not kind of a bit more natural than optimistic, because I also understand, and that is very important, right? We do digital PR, but our clients, they also do a lot, right? They also have a marketing team. They are not really sitting in the corner and waiting for us, right? So that is the reason I try not to be too over optimistic when I talk about the performance, the results of our activities, because, okay, the obvious result is that they are featured on USA Today, on the Washington, you know what I mean, right? That is something that we've really done, right? And then there are something that is more like coming like a combination of forces, I would say. They've done their part well, we've done our part well, and we see it. Because I think a few months ago, whenever you were looking for the best tour operators to climb Kilimanjaro, their brand, it wasn't there. Now, right, at least what I see, right, they are there in Google. So, but one more time, I try not to be over optimistic about that, right? But for sure, we kind of obviously influence the end result. Not talking about organic traffic, right? Because it's also a signal, right, that you do things right. And for sure, digital PR links, right? Including brand mentions, because they play the same role as links nowadays, LLM models, right? And the new reality of how Google also looks at things, it's kind of, it doesn't matter whether you have a link or a brand mention, it works well. So yeah, I think you can do quite a lot with digital PR, but the only thing that's really hard to get there, I think. But if you do it consistently on a regular basis, and not being afraid of failing, because you will fail a lot of times, trust me, just because it's not, journalists, they want one thing, you think that is the bad, then you get there, then they just kind of, ignore you. So that is kind of the part of the whole journey, and it's okay, right? So yeah, I think that will be the answer to your question, hopefully. But if you have any follow-ups, or I made it a little bit not so straightforward, just let me know.
No, that was very helpful, and that's one thing I'm glad you mentioned that I didn't think about that is reaching out and being an expert, right? Just even getting a quote in an article for journalists seeking the insights of someone who has a specialty.
Wrong.
Yeah. And that, because I think typically people think of PR as, well, I did something big, right? Like I made a big donation, or I sponsored this, or right. It doesn't have to be something monumental. It can even just be a little excerpt of some snippet of insight that you provide to help an article be a little more informative, a little more authoritative. So I think that was a great point. Alexandra, I love the time you spent with us, and I thank you for your insights. Like I said, I am an advocate of digital PR, so I ask my questions from a position of I want people to really understand how influential this can be, and I think you've helped prove that point. But before I let you go, I have probably the toughest question anyone will ever ask you on any podcast you'll ever do. And that is this, because I know you travel and you speak, so there's lots of probably places you've been. But of all the places you've been, or even if it's in your hometown, if someone is in that city, what is one place, one restaurant you'd recommend that the food is so good you have to go check it out?
Okay. I don't live in Amsterdam, right? I live in Eindhoven, which is a little bit, well, not so far away from Amsterdam, but if at any point, right, you will be there, then I would recommend you go into a restaurant. It's called Deck 9. It's a small restaurant. They have, I don't really remember whether they ever got a Michelin or something. They might, right? But I don't really want to lie. And they have a quite small menu and not a lot of tables, so you'd better book it in advance. But other than that, it's a lovely restaurant with lovely food, like French, Dutch, I would say.
Okay.
And yeah, I think you get a nice experience there.
Fantastic. Well, if I ever get the chance to go there, I will definitely check out that restaurant. That sounds great. I love small menus, little, a few tables. I love places like that because you know what? They specialize in whatever they're doing, just like you specialize in digital PR. So, I trust anyone that just kind of keeps their focus narrow and really just tries to be the best at what they do. Alexandra, thank you so much for your insights, for your time, and for the restaurant recommendation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. It has been a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, I'll see you on the next More Than You Can Chew.